The keys felt heavier than usual in my hand as I stood outside my apartment door. Something was off. The familiar scratch marks near the lock were gone, replaced by pristine brass and fresh paint. My stomach dropped before my brain could process why. "Can I help you?" A voice startled me from behind. A woman in yoga pants clutched grocery bags, staring at me like I was a burglar. "I live here," I said, gesturing with my useless keys. "No, I live here, just moved in last week." She shifted her bags, eyes narrowing. "Are you looking for the previous owners?" Previous owners. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. I own this apartment. My husband and I bought it 3 years ago. Oh. Recognition flickered across her face. "You must be Cassidy." The realtor mentioned something about a complicated situation. "I'm really sorry, but the sale was completely legal. I have all the paperwork." The hallway started spinning. I grabbed the wall for support, my wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. "Sale? What sale?" "Maybe you should talk to your husband." She edged past me, quickly unlocking the door, my door, and disappeared inside. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I called Ethan, straight to voicemail. Of course. I tried again, pacing the hallway that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. "Cassidy." His voice was careful, controlled. "I was about to call you. Someone's living in our apartment, Ethan. Some woman saying she bought it last week. Tell me this is a mistake." The silence stretched too long. "Mother needed the money for her medical treatments. You know how bad her arthritis has gotten. The apartment was the quickest solution." "The apartment I helped pay for? The one with my name on the deed?" My voice rose with each question. "How did you even manage to sell it without my signature? Remember those papers you signed last month? For the renovation permits?" The memory hit me. A stack of documents he'd brought home late one night, asking me to sign quickly because the contractor needed them first thing in the morning. I'd trusted him, like I always did. "Where am I supposed to live?" The question came out small, broken. "Mother suggested we take the guest room at her place until we figure something out. It's the least she can do, considering." "Considering what?" "That she convinced you to sell our home behind my back." The pieces were falling into place. Karen's increased visits, her casual mentions of how cramped our apartment felt, how we deserved more space. "Don't be dramatic, Cassidy, this is temporary. Once Mother's treatment is paid for—" "Stop saying Mother like she's some sacred being whose needs trump everything else." I was shouting now, not caring who heard. "We're supposed to be partners, Ethan. Partners don't do this to each other." "You're upset. We can talk about this later when you're calmer. I have a client meeting in 5 minutes." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then at the door that used to be mine. Our 5th wedding anniversary was next week. I'd been planning a surprise dinner, had the restaurant booked and everything. Now I stood homeless in a hallway, betrayed by the man who'd promised to put me first, manipulated by a woman who'd spent years undermining our marriage while smiling to my face. My phone buzzed, a text from Lily. "Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I typed back, "Change of plans, need your guest room, and a lawyer." The response was immediate. "What happened?" I looked at the new welcome mat outside my old door, the one Karen had always hated. "I'll explain everything, but first I need to make some calls, starting with the bank that holds our mortgage. If they thought I'd just roll over and accept this, they didn't know me at all. This wasn't just about an apartment anymore. This was war. Lily's guest room felt like a prison cell, even with its fancy Egyptian cotton sheets and aromatherapy diffuser. 3 days of living out of my suitcase, and the walls were already closing in. "You need to eat something," Lily said, setting a plate of toast on the nightstand. "Starving yourself won't fix this." I pushed myself up from the bed where I'd been scrolling through rental listings. "Karen called again, says she's worried about me, wants to have lunch to clear the air. And Ethan?" Radio silence since that first call. I grabbed my phone, pulling up the text thread. "Wait, no, he just messaged. They're moving my things to Karen's today. Apparently there's plenty of room in the basement." Lily's face darkened. "The basement?" Like you're some piece of furniture they can just store away? That's exactly what Karen wants. I stood up, pacing the room. You know what the worst part is? She's been planning this for months. The contractor who did her kitchen renovation told me yesterday she paid him in full using money from our apartment sale, 3 weeks before Ethan even had me sign those fake permits. Jesus. Lily sat on the bed. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. An email from my biggest client. I opened it, then immediately wished I hadn't. They're terminating our contract. My voice sounded distant, hollow. Apparently someone informed them about concerns regarding my stability and reliability. Karen? Has to be. She's on their board of directors. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. 5 years of perfect work gone because my mother-in-law decided I needed to be taught a lesson. The doorbell rang. Lily went to answer it while I tried to steady my breathing. Moments later, she returned with Sophie, Ethan's sister, whose face was flushed with anger. I just came from Mother's house, Sophie said, not bothering with hello. You won't believe what she's doing. Converting my life into kindling, I asked. She's redecorating your old apartment, says she's going to rent it out herself, use the income for her medical expenses. Sophie made air quotes. The arthritis story? Complete bullshit. I checked with her doctor. The room tilted slightly. What? She's fine. Better than fine. She just booked a cruise for Christmas. Using your money, I'm guessing. I sank back onto the bed. Does Ethan know? He knows whatever version of reality Mother feeds him. Sophie sat beside me. But listen, there's more. Ryan called me yesterday. Ryan? I hadn't heard from Ethan's older brother since he'd stormed out of a family dinner 2 years ago after Karen had accused him of stealing their father's watch. He's been gathering evidence. Bank statements, recorded conversations, everything. Turns out Mother's been playing this game for years. What she did to you, she did worse to Ryan's wife before they divorced. My hands clenched into fists. Why are you telling me this? Because Ryan wants to help. He's got connections, lawyers, investigators. Says it's time someone finally stood up to her. Lily, who'd been quietly listening, spoke up. Cassidy, this could be your chance to fight back. I thought about my apartment, my client, my marriage, all systematically dismantled by a woman who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to controlling her son. What's the catch? No catch, Sophie said, just justice. Ryan's willing to meet tomorrow if you're interested. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. Mother says dinner at 7. We need to discuss the living arrangements. I stared at the message, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it had edges, sharp ones. Tell Ryan I'm in, I said, standing up. But first, I have a dinner to attend. Time to show Karen what happens when you back someone into a corner. What are you going to do? Lily asked, worry creasing her forehead. I grabbed my coat, already planning. I'm going to smile and nod and play the perfect daughter-in-law, and then I'm going to burn her whole carefully constructed world to the ground. Sophie's smile was grim. Need backup? No, I said, checking my reflection in the mirror. For this performance, I need to fly solo. But tomorrow we start planning the main event. The coffee shop where I met Ryan felt too exposed, too public for the conversation we were about to have. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by the same forces that were now grinding away at my life. You look exactly like I did 5 years ago, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. That deer-in-headlights expression when you realize what she's capable of. I opened the envelope, pulling out bank statements and photographs. How long did you spend gathering all this? Since the day she convinced my wife I was having an affair. His smile was bitter. Karen's specialty, creating problems she can solve by destroying relationships she doesn't approve of. The documents told a familiar story. Mysterious financial transfers, carefully orchestrated coincidences, relationships systematically dismantled. But one photo made me pause. Karen at lunch with my biggest client, dated 2 months before I lost the contract. She's been planning this for a while, Ryan said, watching my face. The apartment sale, your client, probably more we don't know about yet. Mother likes to be thorough. My phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Where are you? Mother's worried. Still checking up on you? Ryan asked. They both are. I showed him the message. I'm staying in their basement now. Karen's idea of charity. Classic isolation tactic. Next, she'll start suggesting you're unstable, maybe need professional help. Already started. I pulled out my own phone, playing a voicemail from Karen to Ethan I'd intercepted yesterday. I'm just so worried about Cassidy, darling. These mood swings, this paranoia. Perhaps we should consider getting her some help. Ryan's face darkened. You need to get out of there. Today. I can't. Not yet. I leaned forward. Tell me about the watch. He went still. What watch? The one Karen accused you of stealing. Sophie mentioned it yesterday. Dad's Rolex. He laughed without humour. Mother's favourite weapon. She claimed I stole it after he died, used it to turn the whole family against me. Truth is, she sold it herself, used the money to renovate her kitchen. Like she did with my apartment. Exactly like that. He pulled out another document. Here's the receipt from the jewellery store, dated 3 days after she accused me of theft. A commotion near the counter drew my attention. Karen was there ordering coffee, her presence too perfectly timed to be coincidence. She hadn't seen us yet. Back door, Ryan muttered, already standing. Text me later. And, Cassidy, watch your back. She's just getting started. I slipped out moments before Karen turned around, heart pounding. Back in my car, I examined the documents again, pieces clicking into place. The renovation money, the missing watch, the careful manipulation of Ethan's loyalty. My phone rang, Lily. You need to come home now, someone's been in your room. What? Your laptop's gone. And that box of documents from your lawyer? Empty. I started the car, hands shaking. Karen was keeping me distracted. She must have had a key made. There's something else. Lily's voice dropped. I found this note on your bed. It says, ask Ryan about Jessica. The name hit me like a physical blow. Jessica, Ryan's ex-wife, the one Karen had driven away. Call Sophie, I said. Tell her to meet us at your place. And Lily. Don't let anyone else in, not even Ethan. I pulled away from the coffee shop, catching a glimpse of Karen watching from the window. She lifted her cup in a mock toast, her smile saying everything. I'm always one step ahead. But she was wrong, because now I had proof, not just of what she'd done to me, but of years of manipulation. The question was, what would it cost to use it? My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. Mother says you were at Sterling Coffee today, with Ryan. We need to talk. I turned off my phone, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Karen wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten something crucial. When you back someone into a corner, when you take everything they have, they've got nothing left to lose. And I was just getting started. The emergency room's fluorescent lights made Karen look almost vulnerable as she clutched her chest, Ethan hovering beside her like an anxious shadow. I stood in the doorway, watching the performance unfold. The doctor says it's stress-induced, Ethan said, not quite meeting my eyes. She collapsed right after you left the coffee shop. How convenient. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Karen's hand fluttered to her throat. Cassidy, dear. I know we've had our differences, but to suggest I'd save it. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen. I just got off the phone with Jessica. The monitor tracking Karen's heart rate spiked. Ethan's face went blank. Jessica who? Ryan's ex-wife. The one your mother drove to attempt suicide 5 years ago. Ring any bells? Karen's performance faltered for just a moment. Ethan, darling, I think the stress is affecting your wife's judgment. Perhaps she needs professional help? I stepped closer. Like you suggested to Jessica's family after you planted those prescription drugs in her car? Or like you're suggesting to Ethan now? Mother! Ethan's voice held a note of uncertainty I'd never heard before. She's clearly unwell, Karen said, reaching for his hand. Just like that horrible brother of yours, spreading lies. I have the police report. My voice cut through her words. And the toxicology results. Jessica's lawyer kept copies of everything. Funny how history repeats itself, isn't it? First Ryan's wife, then me. The door opened and Sophie burst in, face flushed. Cassidy, we need to talk. Now. In the hallway, she thrust a folder at me. Look what I found in Mother's study while everyone was rushing to the hospital. Inside were documents, bank statements, medical reports, all forged with careful precision. A paper trail designed to make me look unstable, unreliable, possibly dangerous. She's building a case, Sophie whispered, to have you committed, just like Jessica. I closed the folder. Where's Ryan? That's the other thing. Sophie glanced around. He's gone. Disappeared right after your coffee shop meeting. His phone's dead. A nurse approached. Mrs. Brooks is asking for her son. Through the window, I watched Karen whisper something to Ethan. He straightened, then turned toward the door with purpose in his stride. Cassidy. His voice was eerily calm. Mother's doctor wants to discuss some concerns about your recent behavior. I bet he does. I backed away. Let me guess. He's the same doctor who diagnosed Jessica with paranoid delusions. This isn't about Jessica. He reached for my arm. You need help. We all see it. The only thing I see is history repeating itself. I jerked away. Tell me something, Ethan. Did you know about Jessica? About what your mother did to her? His silence was answer enough. Mrs. Miller? A security guard appeared. Please come with me. Doctor's orders. Sophie stepped between us. She's leaving, now. Sophie, don't interfere, Ethan warned. This is for her own good. I met Karen's gaze through the window. She smiled, that same triumphant smile from the coffee shop. But this time I smiled back. Check your phone, I said to Ethan. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. I'd sent him everything. Jessica's police report, Karen's forged documents, the proof of her systematic destruction of anyone who threatened her control. It's all lies, Karen called from her bed, but her voice held a tremor now. The truth's in your hands, I said quietly. The question is, what are you going to do with it? The security guard stepped forward again, but Sophie blocked his path. Touch her, and I'll have this hospital's licensing board on speed dial before you can blink. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Karen? Ryan's not missing. He's at the district attorney's office. Turns out attempted involuntary commitment under false pretenses is a serious crime. The heart monitor's steady beep turned erratic. This time it wasn't an act. As I walked away, Ethan called after me. Cassidy, wait. But I kept walking. Some bridges once burned light the way forward. The district attorney's office felt colder than I remembered. Ryan sat across from me, his expression grim as he spread photos across the table. Each one showed Karen with different members of the hospital board, spanning years. She's been building this network for decades, he said. The doctor who tried to commit you? He's handled 3 similar cases in the past 5 years. All women who threatened her control. I picked up a photo of Karen with the hospital's chief of psychiatry. How deep does this go? Deeper than we thought. Sophie burst through the door, waving a USB drive. You won't believe what I found in Mother's computer. The files loaded onto the screen. Detailed dossiers on every woman who'd ever dated her sons, including me. Financial records, medical histories, personal secrets, all weaponized to maintain control. Jesus, Ryan muttered. Jessica's file is massive. A knock interrupted us. Ethan stood in the doorway looking exhausted. Can we talk? Alone? Ryan tensed, but I nodded. 5 minutes. In the hallway, Ethan paced. Mother's being released tomorrow. She wants to have a family dinner, clear the air. Clear the air or clear the board for her next move? She's different now. The heart scare changed her. He reached for my hand. Please, Cassidy. One dinner. Like the dinner where she convinced Jessica she was unstable? Or the one where she drove Ryan away? I pulled back. How many times are you going to let her play this game? It's not a game. His composure cracked. She's my mother. And I'm your wife. Or did you forget that when you helped her forge my signature on those commitment papers? The silence between us felt like a physical barrier. I never signed, he started. Don't. I pulled out the document Sophie had found. Your signature's right here, next to the doctor's recommendation for involuntary psychiatric hold. His face drained of colour. She said it was for your protection, that you were spiralling. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The attachment made my blood freeze. Security footage from the hospital parking lot, showing Karen walking perfectly steady moments before her collapse. Still think she's changed? I showed him the video. She's playing you, Ethan. She always has been. Mrs. Miller, a police officer approached. We need to discuss the break-in at your apartment. Break-in? Someone accessed your old residence an hour ago. The new tenant called it in. He glanced at his notes. The only items missing were your personal documents and laptop. Ethan's phone chimed. His face went pale as he read the message. Mother's calling an emergency family meeting, he said. Tonight. She says she has proof of your instability. Of course she does. I laughed, but it felt hollow. She just stole it from our apartment. Ryan and Sophie emerged from the office. We've got something, Sophie said. Mother's been embezzling from Dad's estate, using the money to buy influence, pay off doctors, including the one who declared Jessica incompetent, Ryan finished. We can prove it. Ethan looked between us, his loyalty visibly wavering. I need time to think. Time's up, I said quietly. Your mother's making her move tonight, so I'm making mine. What are you going to do? I checked my phone. Another message, this time from Lily. Karen just left your old apartment, heading home with a box of your stuff. I'm going to that family dinner, I said, and I'm bringing receipts. Cassidy. Ethan reached for me again. You have until tonight to decide whose side you're really on. I turned to Ryan and Sophie. Get everything ready. All the evidence, all the witnesses. Jessica agreed to testify, Ryan said. She's flying in tonight. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. Not just anger now, but a cold, clear purpose. Then it's time to show Karen what happens when you push someone too far. This will destroy her, Ethan warned. No, I said, walking away. She destroyed herself. I'm just making sure everyone sees the wreckage. Behind me, I heard Sophie tell Ethan, choose carefully, brother, because after tonight, there's no going back. She was right. After tonight, nothing would be the same, and maybe that was exactly what this family needed. Karen's dining room felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, throwing shadows across faces that had become unrecognizable to me. Ethan sat at his mother's right hand, avoiding my eyes. I'm so glad we could all be here, Karen said, lifting her wine glass. Family should stick together in times of crisis. The manila envelope I'd brought sat heavy in my lap. One move, and everything would change. But Karen spoke first. Before we eat, I have something to address. She nodded to Ethan, who produced a thick folder. We're all concerned about Cassidy's recent behavior. Are we? Sophie's voice dripped acid. Or are you concerned about what she knows? I have documentation, Karen continued smoothly, of concerning patterns. Paranoid accusations, erratic decisions, potential self-harm risks. Like Jessica's documentation, I interrupted. The name fell like a bomb into the perfectly arranged setting. Karen's smile never wavered. Dear, I think you're confused. Jessica had genuine mental health issues. The dining room door opened. Jessica herself walked in, followed by Ryan and 2 police officers. Do I? Jessica asked quietly. Or did you just need me out of the way? Karen's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. This is a private family dinner. Officers, I don't know what you've been told, but they're here about Dad's estate, Ryan said. The money you've been embezzling to pay off doctors and judges. Ridiculous, Karen turned to Ethan. Darling, call our lawyer. Already did, Ethan said, but he wasn't looking at his mother. He was staring at a document from my envelope, the forged commitment papers bearing his signature. He's on his way to represent me. For the first time, Karen's mask slipped. What are you saying? He's saying it's over. I started to rise, but Karen's next words froze me. Show them the video, she commanded. Ethan hesitated, then pressed play on his phone. The security footage showed me in our old apartment, rifling through Karen's desk, pocketing something that glinted in the low light. Theft, breaking and entering, Karen listed. And that's just the beginning. Officers, I'd like to press charges. That's impossible, I whispered. I never. The timestamp is from yesterday, Karen continued, while you were supposedly at the district attorney's office. The room spun. The footage was perfect. Every detail exact, down to the clothes I'd been wearing. But I'd never been there. It's fake, Sophie protested, but doubt had crept into her voice. Like the evidence against me? Jessica asked sharply. Check my phone's GPS, I said to the officers. I was across town all day. Your phone was here, Karen smiled. I have the tracking data. My phone, which had disappeared during the hospital chaos, which had mysteriously reappeared in my purse hours later. You planned this, I realized. All of it. The hospital, the stolen documents, everything. It was a setup. You did always underestimate me, dear. Karen's voice held almost genuine pity. Officers, I believe you have what you need. One of the police officers stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, we need you to come with us. Ethan, I turned to him desperate. You know me. You know I wouldn't. But his face had closed off, that familiar shuttered look when choosing between his wife and his mother. I don't know what to believe anymore. As the officers led me toward the door, Karen's voice followed. Don't worry, dear. We'll make sure you get the help you need. The last thing I saw was Ethan still staring at those commitment papers as his mother's hand came to rest possessively on his shoulder. Sophie and Ryan's protests faded behind me, drowned out by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut. I'd thought I was ready for Karen's worst. I'd been wrong. She hadn't just outmaneuvered me. She'd turned my own plan against me, using my allies, my evidence, even my husband as weapons. The police car door opened, and with it, the terrible realization. In trying to expose Karen's manipulation, I'd walked right into her biggest trap yet. And this time, there might be no way out. The interrogation room's fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps. 48 hours in custody had taught me one thing. Karen's influence reached further than any of us had imagined. The door opened. Detective Morris entered, followed by someone I hadn't expected. Ethan's lawyer, James Chen. Your husband sends his regards, James said, setting his briefcase on the table. And this. He slid a USB drive across to Detective Morris, who plugged it into his laptop. Security footage filled the screen, the same footage Karen had used against me, but this time the timestamp data was visible in the corner. Corrupted. The metadata's been altered, Morris said slowly. Recently. By someone with access to the building's security system, James added. Someone like, say, the property owner? My heart skipped. Karen still owns the building. Mrs. Brooks has been very busy, James continued, producing more documents. These are the original bank records Mr. Brooks asked me to review last year. Notice anything interesting about the signatures? Morris examined them, his expression hardening. They don't match the ones we have on file. A knock at the door. Sophie entered, followed by Jessica and, surprisingly, Karen's personal assistant, Linda. Linda has something to share, Sophie said quietly. Linda stepped forward, trembling. Mrs. Brooks asked me to doctor those security tapes. She has dirt on my family. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Jessica's voice was steel. I learned that the hard way. Morris's phone buzzed. His eyes widened as he read the message. Karen Brooks was just arrested at her home, attempting to destroy evidence. What evidence? I asked. Everything, Sophie said. The original security footage, financial records, emails coordinating with corrupt doctors. She was burning it all when they arrived. And Ethan? The question caught in my throat. James cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks provided the warrant. He's been working with us since the dinner. His mother's actions with the commitment papers finally opened his eyes. The door burst open again. Ryan entered, looking grim. Mother's asking for you, Cassidy. Says she'll only talk to you. Morris nodded. Your choice, Mrs. Miller. Karen sat in her own interrogation room, her perfectly manicured facade cracking at the edges. She smiled when I entered, that same calculating smile I'd grown to hate. Come to gloat, dear. Come to understand. I sat across from her. Why? All of it. Jessica, Ryan, me, your own children. Children leave. Her voice turned bitter. Husbands die. But control. Control stays if you're smart enough to keep it. Like you controlled Dad's death? Ryan's voice came from the doorway. I hadn't heard him follow me in. Karen's mask slipped completely. How did you… Linda kept everything, Mother, including the emails about Dad's medication. For the first time, I saw real fear in Karen's eyes. You can't prove… Actually, Ethan stepped in behind his brother, we can. I found Dad's real medical records, the ones you hid from us. I did it for you. Karen's composure shattered. Everything I did was to keep this family together. No. I stood, finally seeing her clearly. Everything you did was to keep yourself from being alone. But look around, Karen. Where did it get you? She lunged across the table, but the officers were faster. As they restrained her, she screamed, "You'll never understand. Love isn't enough. Control is everything." You're right, I said quietly. I don't understand. And I never want to. Outside, Ethan waited. Cassidy, don't. I held up my hand. You chose her. Every time until now, you chose her. I know. He looked broken, lost. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. No, I said, feeling strangely peaceful. You won't, because I'm choosing myself. I walked away, leaving him standing there. Sophie and Ryan flanked me as we exited the station, into a world that felt somehow lighter, clearer. What now? Sophie asked. I thought about Karen's words about control, about love, about family. Now, we learn how to be free. Behind us, Karen's screams echoed through the station, but they couldn't touch me anymore. Some victories don't look like revenge at all. Sometimes they look like walking away. The courthouse steps felt different under my feet this time. No more uncertainty, no more fear, just the weight of choices and their consequences. Karen's sentencing had drawn a crowd, reporters, curious onlookers, and faces I recognized from her web of manipulation. Jessica stood near the entrance, her shoulders straight, her eyes clear. She nodded as I passed. Inside, Ryan intercepted me before I could reach the courtroom. There's something you need to see. He handed me a folder. Found it in Mother's safety deposit box this morning. Inside was a single document, a contract dated 3 years ago. My signature was there, perfect in every detail. Except I'd never seen it before. It gave Karen full power of attorney over my assets in the event of my mental incapacity. There's more, Ryan said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. The account numbers? They're from my private offshore holdings. The pieces clicked into place. You helped her forge this. I needed her to trust me. His voice hardened. To let me close enough to find evidence about Dad's death. And me? Was I just collateral damage in your revenge plan? You were supposed to be stronger. He finally looked at me. Like Jessica wasn't. The courtroom doors opened. Sophie emerged, her face tight. They're ready. Karen sat at the defendant's table, still somehow maintaining her aristocratic posture. Ethan was 2 rows behind her, a ghost of his former self. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. The judge began speaking, listing Karen's crimes. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted involuntary commitment under false pretenses. The years added up like body counts. Before sentencing, the judge said, "Would the defendant like to make a statement?" Karen stood, turning to face the gallery. For a moment, I saw what she must have been once. Beautiful, fierce, terrified of losing control. Everything I did, she said, was to protect what was mine. You'll understand someday, Cassidy, when what you love starts slipping away. No, I said, standing. I already understand. You never loved them. You just loved owning them. The sentence came down, 15 years. No possibility of parole. As they led her away, she called out to Ethan, but he didn't move. Outside, reporters swarmed, but Sophie cleared a path. Ryan tried to follow, but I stopped him. The offshore accounts, I said. Make it right. Cassidy. Or I'll make it right for you. He nodded, understanding the weight of choices and consequences too. Lily waited in her car, engine running. Ready. Almost. I turned back to the courthouse steps where Ethan stood, looking lost. I filed the divorce papers, he said quietly. I know. I'll never be free of her, will I? That's your choice now. I touched his cheek one last time. Like this was mine. The sun was setting as Lily drove us away, painting the city in shades of amber and shadow. My phone buzzed. A message from my biggest client, offering to reinstate our contract. Then another from Jessica. Dinner soon? We survivors should stick together. Where to? Lily asked. I thought about Karen's words about understanding, about protection, about love, about Ryan's betrayal and Ethan's weakness, and how revenge never looks quite like you expect. The art studio on 5th, I said. I have a meeting about a new project. Starting over? No. I watched the courthouse disappear in the rearview mirror. Starting fresh. There's a difference. My phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number. The message was simple. You were right. About everything. Linda. Attached was a video file. Karen years ago mixing something into her husband's medicine. The final piece of evidence we'd never found, delivered too late to matter for the sentencing, but just in time to remind me that justice and revenge aren't always the same thing. I deleted the file without sending it to Ryan. Some truths serve no purpose except to perpetuate pain. And I was done with other people's versions of justice. The studio's lights were on, waiting. Through the windows I could see blank canvases ready for new stories, new beginnings. Not a happy ending. Those don't exist in families like the Brooks. But maybe something better. An honest one. I stepped out of the car, leaving behind the echoes of vengeance, carrying forward only the lessons learned in its pursuit. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well, on your own terms, in your own truth. The studio door opened. Time to paint my own story.
My name's Anna, and if you told me that my whole world would shift from just one party, I'd have laughed. Yet, here we are. It was at my college buddy Jenna's birthday bash that I first ran into David. He had this easy charm about him, you know, the kind that could light up a dull room. We got talking over drinks, found out we both had a thing for old-school rock and indie films, and just clicked. Never thought I'd meet someone tonight who'd know more about Tarantino movies than me. He chuckled, handing me a drink. Yeah? Well, prepare to be amazed, buddy. I shot back, the conversation flowing easier than I expected. Before we knew it, hours had passed, and we were still wrapped up in our chat, oblivious to the party dying down around us. That night, something just felt right. David wasn't like the guys I usually met. He listened, really listened, and his laughs weren't just polite chuckles, but genuine bursts of amusement. It was refreshing. Within weeks of that first meet, we were pretty much inseparable, and moving in together seemed like a no-brainer. I had a cozy little house my grandparents left me, nothing fancy, but filled with warmth and memories. David loved it from the get-go. Life with David started off as a dream. We'd spend nights binge-watching series, cooking up exotic dishes we barely knew how to pronounce, and planning all the trips we'd take together. It was bliss until his mom, Evelyn, became a more constant presence in our lives. Evelyn was an interesting mix, always sweet when you spoke to her but fiercely independent. She had this air about her, like she'd seen it all and then some. The first time David introduced me, she gave me a smile that was both welcoming and measuring. "So, you're the girl who's stolen my son's heart," she said, her voice soft yet carrying a weight that made me slightly nervous. "Trying my best, Mrs. K," I responded, unsure how to read her. David had always been upfront about being close to his mom, and I respected that. But it was different, seeing it in action. He'd consult her on everything, from how we arranged the furniture to what we'd eat for dinner if she was around. It was a lot. Mom knows best, Anna. You'll see, she's got a knack for these things, he'd say every time I raised an eyebrow at their dynamic. I tried not to let it bother me too much. After all, in every other way, David was the perfect partner, supportive, loving, and always making me laugh when I needed it the most. 2 years flew by in what felt like a blink, and David and I tied the knot. It was a simple ceremony, just family and close friends. Everyone said we looked like the perfect couple, and in that moment, I believed it too. We decided to stay in my house, the one I inherited from my grandparents. It had always felt like home to me, and David had fallen in love with its charm. Not long after our wedding, we found out I was pregnant. The news brought a new kind of joy to our lives, and when we shared it with Evelyn, her reaction was unexpectedly warm. "A grandchild, finally," Evelyn exclaimed, her usual reserved demeanor giving way to genuine excitement. "You'll see, children change everything." And change everything she did. Our daughter Lily was born on a chilly spring morning, her cries filling the room with the most beautiful sound either of us had ever heard. "She's perfect, Anna. Just perfect," David said, looking over at Lily with a kind of awe that melted my heart. The first few months were a whirlwind of diapers, late-night feedings, and more love than I thought possible. But as the dust settled and I tried to find a rhythm to our new life, I realized I was doing it almost entirely alone. Evelyn, despite her initial excitement, was conspicuously absent when it came to actual help. One afternoon, feeling overwhelmed, I called Evelyn, hoping she might want to spend some time with her granddaughter. "Evelyn, I was thinking, maybe you could come over and watch Lily for a few hours? Give me a chance to catch up on some sleep or run some errands?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, dear, I'd love to, but I'm just swamped this week." Evelyn's voice was apologetic, but I detected a note of dismissal that wasn't there before Lily's birth. "You're young, Anna. You'll figure it out." I did. I was taken aback, not just by her refusal, but by the implication that asking for help was a sign of weakness. When I told David about the conversation later, hoping for some support, his response only deepened my frustration. "Mom's right, Anna. She raised me mostly on her own, you know. We can manage," he said, not unkindly, but firmly. "Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice to have some help? Your mom seemed so excited about Lily," I pressed, feeling the gap in our expectations widening. David shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "She was excited about being a grandma, not a babysitter." "We'll be fine, Anna. Really." I loved him, and I loved Lily more than life itself, but I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that crept in with each passing day. I was a marketer by profession, valued at my job, relied upon for my skills and creativity. Yet at home, I felt increasingly like I was expected to be a superwoman, capable of managing everything without falter. Life with a toddler was a beautiful chaos, but after 3 years of sleepless nights and endless days, the walls of our home seemed to close in on me. I needed a change of scenery, badly. That's when I got the idea for a family vacation to Italy. "David, what do you think about taking a trip to Italy this summer?" I asked one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. Lily was at my feet, playing with her toys, blissfully unaware of my growing wanderlust. "Italy, huh?" David looked up, surprised but intrigued. "That sounds amazing, babe. Lily would love it too, her first big trip." Excitement bubbled inside me as I pulled up some travel blogs on my laptop, showing him pictures of the Amalfi Coast, Rome, and Venice. We could visit the beaches, see some historical sites, and just relax. "It'd be good for us, don't you think?" "Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it," he agreed, his enthusiasm matching mine. But just as I was about to start looking into flights and accommodations, he added, "We should tell my mom about this. She hasn't been anywhere in years, remember?" The mention of Evelyn slightly dampened my spirits, not because I disliked her, but because I knew what her joining might imply for our vacation dynamics. Still, I nodded. "Sure, let's tell her. She might enjoy it." The next day, we invited Evelyn over for coffee to break the news. As soon as we mentioned Italy, her face lit up, then just as quickly fell. "Oh, Italy. I haven't been anywhere for so long," she sighed, a hint of sadness in her voice. David jumped in before I could say anything. "Mom, why don't you come with us? It'd be great to have you along." Evelyn's eyes widened with delight, then she turned to me. "Would that be all right with you, Anna? I don't want to impose." I mustered my warmest smile, despite the reservations churning in my stomach. "Of course, Evelyn. It'd be lovely to have you join us." Evelyn hugged me, her gratitude genuine. "Oh, thank you, dear. This means the world to me." Later that night, as I lay in bed browsing through hotel options, the reality of the costs began to sink in. A family room for 4 was significantly cheaper than separate accommodations, but it still stretched our budget. "David, we might need to cut back on some of the outings to make this work financially," I murmured, showing him the figures on my screen. "Don't worry, babe. You always figure things out," he replied, his tone reassuring yet absent, as if the details were just minor nuisances that would sort themselves out. I sighed, closing my laptop. Managing this trip was turning into a project, but the thought of seeing Italy, of watching Lily play on foreign beaches, kept my spirits up. I'd make it work, somehow. After all, wasn't that what I always did? One evening, I spread out all the travel brochures and budget sheets across the kitchen table, trying to make sense of our finances. David wandered in, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "Looks like a command center in here," he joked, taking in the chaos of papers and maps. "Feels like one too," I replied, not quite sharing his humor. "I'm trying to figure out how we can afford the extra costs for your mom without skimping too much on our actual vacation." David popped the tab on his soda, taking a sip before responding. "Well, she's really excited, Anna. Maybe we can just do fewer touristy things. Spend more time relaxing instead?" I nodded, though the thought of cutting back on the experiences I had been dreaming of stung a bit. "Yeah, maybe. Also, I need to sort out something for Evelyn's pets. She doesn't want to leave him alone." "Oh, right," David said, his brow furrowing slightly. "What's the plan?" "I'm thinking of asking Rachel to look after them. I'll have to see if she's available and willing to handle Evelyn's zoo," I said, only half joking. Later that week, I caught up with my friend Rachel at a local cafe to discuss the pet-sitting situation. Rachel had always been the go-to for favors like this, but I knew it was a big ask. "So, I hate to be a pain, but I have a huge favor to ask," I started, stirring my coffee nervously. Rachel smiled, her easygoing nature a comfort. "Shoot. What do you need?" "It's about the Italy trip. Evelyn's coming with us, and I need someone to take care of her puppy and 2 cats. Could you, maybe help out?" I asked, hopeful, but feeling the imposition. Rachel paused, then nodded. "Sure, I can do that. Just show me what needs to be done. How long are you guys gone?" 2 weeks. And you'd be a lifesaver, really. Evelyn's pretty particular about her pets," I explained, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. "No problem. I'll come by a few days before you leave, get the rundown. We'll make sure her little critters are well looked after," Rachel assured me, her tone confident. With the pet situation handled, I turned my attention back to the travel plans. I spent the next few days booking flights, arranging for the family room at the hotel, and tweaking our itinerary to fit the budget. Each evening, David would glance over my shoulder, offering a nod or a simple, "looks good," before turning his attention back to whatever was on TV. The day before our departure, I checked and double-checked our luggage, ensuring we had everything needed for Lily and Evelyn. The stress was mounting, and I felt stretched thin. The trouble with my mother-in-law, Evelyn, began long before we even landed in Italy. It started right there on the plane. We were barely an hour into the flight when Evelyn's patience seemed to wear thin. Lily, my 3-year-old daughter, was a little restless. It was her first long flight after all. "David, can't you keep her quiet? People are trying to rest," Evelyn hissed across the aisle to us, her voice laced with irritation. David looked at me, his face apologetic but his response directed at soothing his mother rather than defending our daughter. "Mom's right, Anna. Maybe get Lily to settle down a bit?" I bit my lip, holding back my frustration as I tried to distract Lily with her favorite book. "Lily, sweetie, let's look at your book, okay?" The moment the plane touched down in Italy, a mixed wave of relief and excitement washed over me, despite the earlier tensions. We made it, despite the logistical nightmares, the long flight, and a fussy toddler. As we shuffled through the crowded airport, the reality of being in a new country began to sink in. "Mama, look. Big planes!" Lily exclaimed, pressing her tiny face against the terminal window, momentarily distracted from her previous crankiness. "Yes, sweetheart, lots of big planes here," I replied, trying to muster as much enthusiasm as I felt drained after the overnight flight. We managed to gather our luggage and navigate to the shuttle that would take us to our hotel on the coast. The drive offered stunning views of rolling hills and the glistening Mediterranean Sea, which should have lightened the mood, but Evelyn seemed less than impressed. "It's so hot here. And why is everything so dusty?" Evelyn complained, fanning herself with one of the travel brochures. I exchanged a quick glance with David, hoping he'd help keep his mother's spirits up. "Well, Mom, it's Italy in the summer. It's part of the charm," he said, trying to sound cheerful. When we finally arrived at the hotel, the beauty of the old building with its ivy-covered walls and panoramic sea views struck me. I hoped this would lift everyone's spirits. "Here we are," I announced. "Let's check in and get settled." The lobby was cool and inviting, a welcome respite from the heat. As we approached the front desk, I handled the check-in process, confirming our reservation for a family room. Evelyn peered over my shoulder as I spoke with the receptionist. "Make sure we have separate rooms, Anna. I need my space, especially after that flight," she whispered harshly into my ear. I paused, taken aback by her tone. "Evelyn, I booked a family suite. It's spacious, and I thought." "I don't care what you thought. I told you I needed my own room," Evelyn interrupted, her voice stern. The receptionist, catching the tension, quickly interjected. "I'm sorry, but we are fully booked at the moment. I can put you on a waiting list for a separate room, and we might have one available in a couple of days." Evelyn huffed, clearly not satisfied. "Fine. I suppose I'll have to manage until then." We made our way to our suite, which was beautifully decorated and overlooked the sea. I thought it was perfect. "Look at this view, Evelyn. It's not every day we get to see something like this." I tried to lighten the mood as we entered the room. Evelyn, however, was already inspecting the bedrooms, her displeasure evident. "I guess it'll have to do. But I expect that separate room as soon as it's available," she stated, making no effort to hide her annoyance. "Of course, Evelyn. I'll make sure of it," I assured her, feeling the tension rise. 2 days after we arrived in Italy, Evelyn finally moved into her own room. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking maybe now we could all enjoy a bit of what this vacation was supposed to offer. But the tension didn't dissipate as I'd hoped, it just shifted. The very next morning, at breakfast with all the hotel guests milling around, Evelyn dropped another bomb. "Lily, stop calling me grandma in public. It makes me feel old. Just use my name," she said sharply, right in front of everyone. Lily looked at me, her big eyes filling with confusion and hurt. I was floored. "Evelyn, she's just a child. She's excited to be with you." I tried to keep my voice even, but the sting of her words bit deep. Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "I'm here to relax, Anna, not to play the doting grandmother. You need to respect that." My frustration mounted, but before I could respond, David chimed in. "Mom's right, Anna. Let's just keep things light. We're on holiday." His words felt like a betrayal. Not wanting to make a scene, I swallowed my anger and nodded, though inside, I was reeling. The next incident came a few days later. I woke up to find both David and Evelyn missing. Confused, I asked the receptionist, who informed me that they had rented a car and gone out for the day. They hadn't even bothered to tell me or invite us. When they returned in the evening, arms laden with shopping bags filled with high-end fashion and jewelry, the exclusion felt deliberate. They were chatting and laughing, caught up in their own little world. "Look at this, Anna, isn't it gorgeous?" Evelyn flaunted a new necklace, the price tag of which could have funded our entire family's meals for days. I bit my lip, forcing a smile. "It's lovely, Evelyn." David then showed off some of his new clothes, completely oblivious to my growing dismay. "Got some great stuff today." That's when I noticed the logos. This wasn't just any shopping spree, it was extravagance at its peak. Panic set in. "David, how did you pay for all this?" I asked, my voice tight. His face fell slightly. "Oh, I used the joint account. It was easier." The joint account, our savings for emergencies and significant expenses, not luxury shopping. "You used our savings to buy all this?" My voice cracked, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. David's response was defensive. "Why not? We're on vacation, Anna. Why can't we indulge a little?" "A little?" I shot back, my temper flaring. "You didn't think to discuss it with me first? And what about Lily and me? You didn't think to include us in your plans today, or even buy something small for your daughter?" Evelyn, ever the ally to her son, interjected sharply. "Oh, stop being so greedy, Anna. You're ruining the holiday with your nagging." Greedy? Nagging? The words stung, and I felt utterly isolated. From then on, David and Evelyn did their own thing, more shopping, fancy dinners, while Lily and I were left to make our own plans. That morning I woke up to an unusual silence, a cold, empty space where David usually slept. Frantically, I checked around, only to find his side of the room perfectly tidy, his belongings gone. My heart pounded as I raced to Evelyn's room, fearing the worst. The door swung open to an empty room, her bags missing, no signs of her ever being there. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and dialed David's number, then Evelyn's. No answer. Lily stirred in her bed, her sleepy eyes searching. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" "Let's find him, sweetie." I tried to reassure her, masking the tremor in my voice. But as minutes turned into hours with no return calls, Lily's soft whimpers grew into desperate cries. "I want Daddy." Just then, my phone rang. It was David. His voice was eerily calm, chillingly distant. "We're at the airport, Anna. Mom needs to go home. She's tired of the vacation, tired of the constant complaints and..." He paused, his words twisting the knife. "Your greed." In the background, I could hear Evelyn's biting voice. "She's ruined everything with her selfish ways." "How could you?" I gasped into the phone, my voice a blend of anger and heartbreak. "How could you leave us here, in a foreign country? How could you choose her over your own daughter?" David's reply was cold, final. "My mother is the most important person to me. She needs me." "You'll manage, you always do." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, numb, then turned to see Lily's tear-streaked face. Anger surged through me, not just for me, but for my little girl, abandoned by the person she adored. In that moment, a plan formed, born from the wreckage of our ruined vacation. I called Rachel, my friend back home taking care of Evelyn's pets. Through clenched teeth, I explained everything. "Rachel, are you at Evelyn's house now?" "Yes, I'm just about to leave," she replied, her voice tinged with concern. "Leave the pets out of the utility room. Open all the doors. Let's see how tidy Evelyn finds her home when she returns," I said, the words bitter, but strangely empowering. "Are you sure?" Rachel hesitated. "Yes. Do it. Then don't go back tomorrow. She needs to see what it's like when someone she relies on lets her down," I insisted, the plan crystallizing with each word. Rachel did as I asked, freeing the energetic puppy and the curious cats into the pristine environment of Evelyn's house. We ended the call with a shared, dark chuckle, imagining the chaos that would greet Evelyn upon her return. The late afternoon sun was dipping below the horizon when my phone erupted with an angry call from David. His voice was livid, strained through exhaustion and frustration. Anna, we can't get into Mom's house. Your friend isn't answering her phone, and we're locked out. Our flight was delayed, we're tired and just want to get in. I could hear the fatigue in his voice, but my patience had worn thin. That sounds like a problem you'll have to sort out yourselves, David. I'm not your keeper. A few hours later, Evelyn herself called, her voice shrill and frantic. Anna, this house is a disaster. The puppy has destroyed everything. There's poop on my bed, my shoes are chewed up, and the furniture's torn apart. It stinks, and we can't even stay here. She was nearly hysterical, the background noise of David's futile attempts to calm her adding to the chaos. And to top it off, the rescue service won't let us in without the house documents, which, guess what, your little stunt got destroyed too. She continued, barely pausing to catch her breath. I responded with as much calm as I could muster. Evelyn, I am still on vacation. You need to handle this. Maybe check into a hotel for the night? She was furious. You expect us to go to a hotel? I want you to call your security company right now and get them to open your house. We're coming there. I stood firm, the edge in my voice sharp as a knife. No, Evelyn. I won't do that. You made your choice, and now you can deal with the consequences. A week later, I returned home, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. Sure enough, David and Evelyn were waiting at my doorstep, their faces stormy. You crossed the line, Anna. I'm filing for divorce. David shouted before I even had a chance to set down my bags. I sighed, more relieved than upset. I was going to suggest the same thing, David. His anger faltered, replaced by a stunned silence. Evelyn tried to chime in, her words laced with venom. You're nothing without us, Anna. You'll regret this. Ignoring her, I turned to David. Pack your things. You need to leave. Now. The gravity of my words hung heavy in the air. David, finally seeing the resolve in my eyes, nodded slowly and went inside. Evelyn, her face a mask of rage, followed him without another word. They moved out that evening. The divorce proceedings were brief. David and I had little to contest, and it was clear we both wanted it over with. He went back to live with his mother, and that was that. Now, as I sit in the quiet of the home I fought to protect, I realize I've regained more than just my independence. I've reclaimed my peace, my dignity, and a life where I no longer have to compromise my happiness for someone else's selfishness. My name's Emma. Jack and I have a son, Liam, who's 20 and off at college right now. We've been scrimping and saving for years to keep him there, cutting corners, skipping vacations, you name it, all so he could have a shot at something bigger. We live in the house my grandmother left us when she moved into a nursing home. It's large, comfy, but nothing fancy, just feels like home. Jack works at the local hardware store, and I manage the front desk at a doctor's office. We make do, living a no-frills kind of life, and that's just fine by us. It was a Thursday afternoon, sun hanging just right, made you think about calling it a day early. But then Jack's phone rang, cutting through any thoughts of an early weekend. I was chopping carrots, mind half on dinner, half on a list of bills that needed paying, when I heard him answer. Hello? Mom? Slow down, what's wrong? His face went white as he listened. I stopped what I was doing, towel in hand, watching him pace. He ended the call, looking shaken. That was my dad, he said, sinking into the couch like his strings had been cut. Their business tanked. Bankrupt. They've lost everything, even the house. My heart sank. Oh, Jack, that's terrible. What are they planning to do? They want to come stay with us. Just for a bit, they said, till they sort something out. I hesitated, thinking about our already tight budget, the quiet order of our life that was about to be upended. And what did you tell them? He rubbed his neck, a sure sign he was stressed. Told them I'd talk to you first. It's your house, Emma. Wouldn't just spring that on you without checking. Jack's parents, Frank and Helen, they weren't the easygoing type. High flyers, used to the good life, and our simple setup was miles from what they were accustomed to. You know how they are, Jack. This house, it ain't their style. I know. He looked uneasy. But they're my folks, They're stuck. Thinking of all the times they'd visited, noses turned up at our modest living, it was clear they'd be like fish out of water here. But then, picturing them desperate enough to ask for help, my resolve softened. Alright, they can come. But it's temporary, right? Just till they're back on their feet? He picked up his phone, dialed, and after a short, muffled exchange, Mom, Emma, and I talked it over. You can crash here for a bit. But just till you find a place, got it? We're not running a hotel. I couldn't hear what was said on the other end, but Jack's tight-lipped, yes, Mom, we're clear, gave me the gist. He hung up and exhaled long and hard. They're thankful, They'll be here next week. Last week, Jack told his folks they could stay with us for a bit. And today, they were moving in. I watched from the porch as 2 huge trucks rolled up our driveway, and I swear, my heart sank. Jack was out there directing traffic like some parking lot attendant, trying to keep a smile plastered on his face. Frank was the first to barrel out of the car, a big grin on his face, clapping Jack on the back so hard you'd think he'd won the lottery and not just moved into his son's house. Emma, darling. Helen swept up to me, all perfumed and peppy, planting a kiss on my cheek that felt more like a branding iron. You're an angel for letting us invade like this. I forced a smile, my eyes darting to the mountain of stuff they were unloading. It's no problem, Helen. But, is this all of it? Oh, this is just the essentials. She waved a dismissive hand, as if the pile of furniture and boxes wasn't already swallowing our front yard. The rest we've put in storage. Essentials? I bit my tongue to keep from saying anything rash. If these were essentials, I dreaded to think what they'd left behind. Jack caught my eye, and I could tell he was thinking the same thing. Let's get this stuff inside then, Jack said, more to himself than anyone else. Frank and Helen directed the movers with the kind of authority you'd think they were moving into a palace, not our modest little home. The movers shuffled past, hauling in armchairs, countless boxes, and, would you believe it, a grandfather clock. Who needs a grandfather clock in their temporary home? Right there, boys, just set it all there, Frank directed, pointing at various spots around our living room, which was rapidly disappearing under a sea of their belongings. I pulled Jack aside while the movers took a breather. Jack, this is crazy. They've brought enough to furnish a whole house. Where are we going to put all this? Jack rubbed his temples. I know. I'll talk to them, okay? Let's just get through today. We retreated as the movers continued their work. The whole ground floor was turning into a replica of Frank and Helen's old house. Every corner filled, every space taken over. By the time the movers were done, our once cozy living room looked more like a storage unit. Dinner that night was a chaotic affair. We barely found the table under all the clutter. Frank and Helen seemed oblivious to the mess, chatting away about their journey here. Emma, you really should try this wine, Frank said, popping open a bottle of something French and probably more expensive than our entire grocery budget for the week. We're so grateful to you both, Helen chimed in, her voice sugary enough to give you cavities. It's just till we find our feet. Yeah, about that, Jack started, clearing his throat. We need to talk about some ground rules. Space is tight, and... Oh, don't worry about it, son. Frank waved him off. We'll manage just fine. Won't we, dear? He smiled at Helen, who nodded enthusiastically. I looked around at our invaded space, the piles of boxes, the fancy ornaments, crowding out our simple decorations. Manage just fine? I wasn't so sure about that. Living with Frank and Helen had been an adjustment, to put it mildly. A few days have passed since they moved in, and just when I thought we'd settled into some kind of routine, the kitchen became the new battleground. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was fixing dinner like usual. Something simple and hearty, spaghetti with a homemade tomato sauce. I was stirring the pot when Helen waltzed into the kitchen, her nose wrinkling as if she'd just walked into a barn. "What's that smell?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's dinner," I replied, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "Spaghetti night." "Spaghetti?" she scoffed, peering over my shoulder. "Where's the meat? The fresh herbs? This is what you feed us?" Jack, hearing the commotion, wandered in, drying his hands on a dish towel. "What's the problem?" His mom turned to him with a look that could curdle milk. "The problem, Jack, is that we're expected to eat this." She gestured at the bubbling pot as if it were a cauldron of poison. I took a deep breath, trying not to let her get to me. "It's what we usually eat. We can't afford steaks and fancy meals every night." Jack stepped between us, his face set in hard lines. "Mom, this is Emma's house, and this is what we eat. If you want something else, you're welcome to cook for yourselves." "Oh, we will," Helen retorted, her eyes narrowing. "And we expect you to provide the groceries we require. We're not used to living like this." I'd had enough. "Look, I'm sorry you're used to different, but this is what we can manage. Our budget doesn't stretch to luxuries." Frank, who'd been silent up till then, chimed in, his voice booming. "Then perhaps you need to reevaluate your budget, young lady. We're not animals to feed on scraps." Jack's jaw clenched. "Dad, that's enough. We're doing the best we can." The room was thick with tension, everyone's shoulders up around their ears. Finally, Helen huffed. "Fine. Tomorrow, we'll give you a list of what we eat. You can make sure it's here." The next day, true to her word, Helen handed me a list. Marbled beef, fresh seafood, organic this, imported that. I looked at the list, my heart sinking. That evening, we sat down with Frank and Helen, the list between us on the kitchen table. "We expect proper meals, steaks from marbled beef or the finest fish," Frank declared, as if it was the most normal request in the world. Jack and I exchanged shocked looks. "We can't swing that," he said, his voice firm but weary. "That's just not in our budget." Their response was swift and harsh. "Lazy, both of you," Helen snapped. "Can't even provide a decent meal." In the end, feeling cornered, I caved to their demands. I started buying only the highest quality products for them, while Jack and I got by on fast food, just to save costs. A month later, I sat down to crunch the numbers, and my heart nearly stopped. Our food expenses had doubled. And to top it off, Helen's daily luxurious baths had sent our water bill through the roof. Dinner had become a battlefield, but tonight was different. Frank and Helen were digging into some lavish dishes they'd insisted on buying, marbled steaks and imported fish. Meanwhile, Jack and I sat across from them, our plates filled with the simple pasta we could afford. The disparity wasn't just on our plates, it was drawing a deeper line between us every day. As they savored another bite of their expensive meals, I couldn't hold back any longer. "This has got to stop," I said, the words heavy in the air. Helen looked up, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What are you talking about now? We can't keep living like this. Eating separately, different meals, it's ridiculous. From now on, everyone in this house eats the same. And we're sticking to what we can afford." Frank laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "You expect us to eat that slop?" "It's not slop, it's dinner. It's what we eat," I shot back, my patience fraying. The laughter vanished from Frank's face, replaced by a scowl. Helen chimed in, her tone sharp and accusing. "How can you be so greedy and lazy? Cooking decent food isn't that hard." They both turned to Jack, their expressions full of expectation. "You're going to let her talk to us like this? In your own house?" That was the last straw. Jack's hand slammed down on the table, making the plates jump. "First off, this is Emma's house. And you will treat her with respect." The impact of his words hit hard. Helen's eyes filled with tears, her voice quivering. I never expected you to raise your voice at me, your own mother. Frank's anger boiled over as he stood, pointing an accusing finger at Jack. Look at you, henpecked and dancing to her tune. Is this what you've become? I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. Enough. This conversation is over. From today, no more expensive steaks or fish. We eat the same, all of us. Their looks could have frozen the room. For a moment, no one moved, then, without a word, Frank and Helen pushed back from the table and left. Jack and I sat back down, the silence hanging heavy between us. He reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. I'm sorry it had to come to this. I am too, I replied, feeling the weight of the evening settle around us. But it's the right thing. We can't live like this. After the big blow-up at dinner, things cooled down, but only on the surface. Frank and Helen were quieter, sure, but there was a slyness to their silence that put me on edge. I had a feeling they weren't going to take the new house rules lying down, and I was right. It started subtly. A few days later, I was cleaning up after a lunch of sandwiches when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and headed to the front door, expecting maybe a package or a neighbor. But when I opened it, there stood a delivery guy holding a large, aromatic bag from some high-end restaurant in town. Delivery for Emma, he said, glancing at his clipboard. I was puzzled. There must be some mistake. I didn't order this. Just then, Helen appeared behind me, her smile a bit too wide. Oh, I took the liberty of ordering for us. I thought we deserved a nice meal after all the recent discomfort. I frowned, taking the bag hesitantly. Helen, we talked about this. We're cutting back on expenses. She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. I thought it was on your tab, dear. My mistake. Jack walked in from the kitchen, overhearing us. What's going on? Your mother decided we deserved an expensive lunch, I said, the weight of the bag in my hands suddenly feeling heavier. Jack's expression hardened. Mom, we agreed, no more of this. Frank stepped into the hallway, his voice booming. What's a little lunch going to hurt? You can't expect us to live like monks forever. I set the bag down on the entryway table, feeling the frustration bubble up. It's not just lunch. It's every meal, every extra expense we can't afford. We told you, we're sticking to a budget. Helen's face turned cold. Well, if you're going to make such a fuss over a simple meal, I suppose we won't bother next time. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. It's not just about the meal, it's about respecting the rules of the house. You can't keep going behind our backs. The conversation went in circles for a few more minutes until Frank and Helen retreated to their room, leaving the uneaten, expensive lunch on the table. Jack and I looked at each other, the unspoken agreement hanging between us that this couldn't go on. I'll call the restaurant, explain the situation, and cancel any future orders made without our consent, I said, picking up the phone. Jack nodded, his jaw set. I'll talk to them again. This sneaky stuff has to stop. The peace was short-lived after the incident with the unauthorized lunch. Helen and Frank seemed to simmer just below the surface, and you could cut the tension in the house with a knife. I was washing dishes one evening when the calm shattered once again. Jack had just come in from the yard, looking weary. I was about to ask him about his day when the loud crash from the living room had us both running. We found Frank standing over a broken vase, one of the few decorations I really cared about. What happened here? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice level. It slipped, Frank said, barely looking regretful. Accidents happen. But his tone was all wrong. It wasn't apologetic, it was defiant. Jack bent down to pick up the pieces, and I couldn't help but say, this vase was from my grandmother. It's been here longer than I have. Helen scoffed from the doorway. It's just a vase. You can get another. That's not the point, Helen, I snapped, feeling my frustration rise. The point is respect, something that's clearly lacking here. You want to talk about respect? Frank shot back, his voice raising. What about respecting us? Treating us like second-class citizens in this house? Jack stood up, facing his father. You're living here by our goodwill, Dad. Remember that. It doesn't feel like goodwill. Helen chimed in, her words sharp. It feels like we're unwelcome. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope with Frank and Helen in our house, but one evening pushed me past my breaking point. We were sitting around the dinner table, the same place that had witnessed countless arguments now, when Helen casually dropped her latest bombshell. Jack, darling, I found this lovely coat today, and I think we should buy it using the college fund you've set up for Liam, she said, as if suggesting we switch brands of coffee. I choked on my water, coughing as I set my glass down hard on the table. What did you just say? I managed, my voice a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Helen smiled sweetly, clearly mistaking my shock for compliance. It's just money, dear. Liam can always take out loans for college. I really need a new coat. Jack, who'd been quietly seething beside me, slammed his fork down. Mom, that's out of the question. That money is for our son's education. We're not using it for anything else. Helen's face twisted into a scowl. How can you deny your own mother a simple request? It's not simple, and that's final, I snapped, feeling the last of my patience evaporate. Frank chimed in, his voice raised to a shout. You're both being unreasonable and cruel. We're your family. The threat came next, his voice cold and calculated. Maybe the local press would be interested to know how you treat your family. What about your bosses, huh? Would they like to know? I felt a mix of fury and fear churn in my stomach, but I knew we couldn't cave. Enough, I shouted back, standing up. This is not how family treats each other. You two need to find another place to live. This isn't working. Helen burst into tears, playing the victim, while Frank continued to hurl accusations and threats. The dinner ended with them storming out of the room, leaving Jack and me in stunned silence. Once the house was quiet, I retreated to the bedroom and dialed my grandmother. She picked up after a few rings, her voice a comforting presence. Grandma, it's Emma, I said, my voice thick with emotion. What's wrong, dear? She asked, her tone immediately alert. I poured out everything, the demands, the threats, the impossible situation with Helen and Frank. She listened without interrupting, her quiet hums a steady reassurance in the background. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then, decisively, she said, I'll come to stay with you for a couple of months. Are you sure, Grandma? What about the nursing home? I'm sure. It sounds like you need me there, and I'm not one to sit by when my family is in trouble, she declared, her voice resolute. When Grandma arrived, it was like a gust of fresh air swept through the house. She might have been older and moved a little slower, but her spirit was as fiery as ever. Frank and Helen were visibly put off by her sudden presence, their discomfort clear as day. I'll be staying on the ground floor, Grandma declared firmly the moment she rolled through the door, her suitcase following behind her like a loyal companion. I expect some things will need to be moved. Frank tried to mask his irritation with a forced smile. Of course, we'll make you comfortable. Won't we, Helen? Helen nodded stiffly, her eyes darting around, probably calculating what they'd need to shift or hide away. I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. Finally, someone was putting them in their place. As soon as the movers finished rearranging the furniture to make room for Grandma, she called a family meeting in the living room. Now, I've heard quite a bit from Emma about what's been going on here, and I'm not pleased, she began, her tone stern, cutting through any pretense of pleasantries. Frank opened his mouth to protest, but Grandma raised her hand, silencing him. I'm not done. This house is still mine, technically. And while I've allowed Emma and Jack to live here without rent, that doesn't extend to you too. The blood drained from Helen's face. You want us to pay rent? She sputtered. Yes, I do. $4,000 a month, Grandma stated flatly. That's outrageous, Frank exclaimed, standing up from his chair. "We can't afford that." "Well, considering the costs you've been racking up here, I'd say you can afford to cut back on your luxuries," Grandma shot back. "But we're family," Helen tried, her voice quivering slightly. "Family doesn't exploit each other," Grandma countered. "Since you've been enjoying a lifestyle beyond your means on my granddaughter's dime, I think it's only fair." Frank and Helen were at a loss for words, exchanging glances as if looking for an out, but finding none. "And one more thing," Grandma continued. "If you think the rent is too high, you're welcome to find somewhere else to live. Or, if you decide to stay, you'll provide me with daily assistance. I need help getting around, meals prepared, and someone to ensure I'm taken care of." Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her earlier bravado evaporated completely. Frank, who had always prided himself on his independence, looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Think it over," Grandma finished, her voice softening just a tad. "I'll need your answer by tomorrow morning." As they retreated to their room, presumably to discuss their limited options, Grandma turned to us, her expression softening. "Don't you worry, kids. We'll sort this mess out." The morning after Grandma laid down her new house rules, it was like someone had flipped a switch in Frank and Helen. I walked into the kitchen to find them packing their things, a pile of boxes already forming at the door. "We've decided to move out," Frank announced, not looking up from the box he was sealing. "We found a small apartment. We'll take our things and go." Helen was quieter, busily stuffing things into bags, her movements sharp and quick. "It's for the best," she muttered, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. The rest of the morning was a blur of activity. Boxes and furniture moved out the door. Jack helped, more out of a sense of duty than anything else. By mid-afternoon, their part of the house was eerily empty, the echo of their departure hanging in the air. Once they'd driven off, Grandma, who'd been watching quietly from her chair, gave me a knowing look. "Well, that's that then. They'll be all right, you know. Sometimes a little hardship is needed to bring people back to earth." We found out later that they'd sold most of their belongings to cover the rent and their other debts. The luxurious life they were used to was trimmed down to essentials, much like their new apartment. Grandma stayed with us for 2 more weeks, a comforting presence in the house. But eventually, she decided it was time to return to her nursing home. Driving her back to the nursing home, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. "Thanks for everything, Grandma. We couldn't have managed without you." She waved off my thanks with a chuckle. "Oh, nonsense. You're stronger than you think. Just remember to stand up for yourselves. No one else will do it for you." I hugged her goodbye, promising to visit soon. When I got home, the house seemed bigger, quieter. That night, we sat on our porch, the evening air cool and pleasant. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we had caught it, dealt with it, and were ready to move on. Whatever came next, we knew we could handle it together, with or without anyone else's approval. My name is Maria. Life was plodding along the same old routine until one rainy Tuesday changed everything. I was holed up in a cozy corner of Joe's cafe, nursing a hot coffee and trying to shake off the chill. The rain was relentless, and I hoped it would wash away the funk I was in after a tough critique in my fashion design class. The bell above the cafe door jangled, and in came this guy, soaked from head to toe. He looked around, a bit lost, then chose the table right next to mine. There was something about him that was hard to ignore, even though I usually kept to myself. He caught me staring, and instead of looking away, he grinned. "Rough day, huh? Mind if I sit here?" "Go ahead, it's free," I said, trying not to sound too interested. He pulled out a chair, sat down with a sigh, and extended his hand. "I'm James. And you are?" "Maria." I shook his hand, noting his firm grip. "So, Maria, always this quiet in here?" he asked, looking around the nearly empty cafe. "Usually. Keeps the nosy folks at bay," I replied, raising an eyebrow. He chuckled. "Well, you could do worse. But seriously, what brings you here on a day like this? Just hiding from the rain and some critiquing eyes. I'm a dressmaker, or at least I'm trying to be one. Had a tough day at fashion school. A dressmaker, huh? That's awesome. I'm in sales. Totally different world. But hey, we've all got our battles, right? Right, I nodded. His easy demeanor was a welcome change from the usual stress I faced. We ordered another round of coffee, and the conversation flowed as easily as the rain outside. We talked about everything from our jobs to our dreams. James wanted to make it big in sales, always chasing the next big deal. What about you, Maria? What's your big dream? He asked, leaning in a bit. To run my own atelier. I want to design clothes that don't just fit the body, but fit the soul too. Sounds cheesy, huh? Not at all. You'll get there. And hey, if you ever need a brutally honest opinion on your designs, give me a shout. I'm known for my brutal honesty. As the rain tapered off, we realized we'd spent hours talking. Guess it's time to face the real world again, James said reluctantly. Yeah, guess so. Thanks for the company, James. It was surprisingly nice. Same here, Maria. Here's my number. Text me about those designs, or if you just want to escape another critique session, he said, scribbling on a napkin. James and we didn't waste any time. We knew we had something special, and before a year had ticked by, we were planning a wedding. It was nothing fancy, just close friends and family in a little chapel downtown. After we got married, things started moving even faster. We found a small apartment, big enough for two, and soon enough, it needed to be big enough for three. Lily came along, and suddenly my dreams of running my own atelier didn't seem so distant. James, can you believe we're doing this? A family, my atelier, it's all happening. I said to him one night as we sat surrounded by sketches and fabric samples. James was sprawled on the sofa, papers scattered around him, looking every bit the part of a tired sales manager. It's a lot, Maria. But hey, we're making it happen, right? Just gotta keep pushing. Opening the atelier wasn't smooth sailing. Money was tight, and James's income was hit or miss, depending on the month. But I was determined. I started taking custom orders, sewing late into the night while James would try and pick up extra shifts. It was a grind, but a shared one. Hey, babe, these electric bills are killing us. Maybe cut back on the late nights? James would say, half joking, but knowing full well the lights were on for a reason. I'd shoot back, a bit sharper than intended. Sure, and maybe you could stop buying those fancy suits? James would raise an eyebrow, then grin. Ouch. Low blow. But fair enough. We both gotta make some sacrifices, huh? Exactly. If we tighten up now, think of where we could be in a few years. I'd respond, softening. I knew he was trying, but so was I, hard. As the atelier began to gain a bit of traction, my relationship with James saw more strain. We were both hustling, but our ideas of hustle looked pretty different. James loved his designer labels, a habit that didn't die with marriage or fatherhood. It was one of those constant nags at the back of my mind, gnawing away. You buying another watch? Really, James? I'd snap after seeing a new box on our dresser. It's not a big deal, Maria. It was on sale. He'd defend himself, his tone defensive. A sale? We need a new sewing machine. That's what we need on sale, I'd retort, frustration bubbling over. These spats became more frequent. They said money problems could break a marriage, and now I understood why. But every time I looked at Lily or walked into my atelier, I felt the fight in me burn brighter. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a future, our daughter's future. As the months rolled by, the atelier started to become what I had dreamed. Orders were coming in, clients were happy, and my little corner of the world was thriving. Life at the atelier was booming, but at home, things were starting to fray around the edges. Lily was growing up fast, already a teenager with her own ideas and attitudes about the world. She wasn't the little girl who used to play with fabric scraps on the floor of my studio anymore. Now, she seemed more interested in her phone and what her friends were doing. One evening, I overheard her talking on the phone. My mom? Yeah, she's just a dressmaker. It's kinda old-fashioned, you know? Not really cool. Hearing her say that stung more than I wanted to admit. The next day, I tried to talk to her about it. Lily, I heard you talking about my job last night. Does it really embarrass you that I'm a dressmaker? She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. It's just, all my friends' parents have normal jobs, and it's not cool, Mom. Normal jobs? Lily, what I do is a profession. It's how we manage to live comfortably. Don't you think that's important? I was trying to keep my voice even, but it was hard not to feel hurt. Whatever, Mom. It's just how I feel. She walked away, her words hanging heavy between us. James's spending habits didn't help matters. Every month, there seemed to be new charges for clothes or gadgets he didn't need. James, we talked about this. We need to save, not spend. Especially on things we don't need. Come on, Maria, I work hard. I should be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. It's not like I'm blowing through our savings. He brushed off my concerns with a wave of his hand. But it's not just about you, or even us. It's about Lily, about her future. We need to be thinking long-term. My voice was rising, frustration boiling over. All right. I get it. I'll cut back. James's reply was quick, an attempt to end the conversation more than a promise to change. Then there were the moments with Lily that felt like trying to talk to a stranger. Lily, you used to love coming to the atelier. Don't you want to help me out anymore? I asked her one Saturday morning, hoping to reconnect. Mom, that was when I was a kid. I'm not interested in that stuff anymore. She barely looked up from her phone. I sighed, feeling the rejection. You know, I built all this for us, for our family. I thought you'd be proud. Mom, it's just not my thing, okay? Her tone was dismissive, and it felt like a door slamming shut. One day, scrolling through Lily's phone while she was doing homework, I stumbled across a photo that made me pause. It was Lily and an unfamiliar young woman, both smiling at the camera. Lily, who's this with you in the picture? She glanced over, her expression shifting to discomfort. Oh, that's just my friend's mom. But it didn't stop there. Lily started spending more time with James, often out of the house. Meanwhile, I buried myself in work, barely seeing them. I noticed more photos popping up on social media, Lily, James, and the same woman at various events and beautiful places. It became a pattern, this mysterious woman always there, smiling alongside my family while I was left out, sewing away into the night. Coming home that night felt different. The house was too quiet, and a sinking feeling hit me as soon as I turned the key in the lock. I called out, expecting to hear James or Lily, but there was no response. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I stepped further inside. The living room light was on. I rounded the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There, on our sofa, sat James and a woman, the same woman from the pictures. James, what is this? What's going on? My voice came out sharper and louder than I intended. James didn't even have the decency to stand up. He just looked at me, cold and distant. Maria, this is Helen. She's moving in. We need you to move out. The words were so blunt, so brutally delivered, they nearly knocked the wind out of me. Move out? This is my home, James. You're asking me to leave my own house? Helen smirked, crossing her legs and looking around like she owned the place. Well, it seems like James made his choice, honey. Best you make this easy on everyone and just leave. Shut up. I snapped, my focus shifting angrily between her and James. I'm not talking to you. James, how could you do this to us? To your family? James stood up finally, his expression one of annoyance rather than remorse. It's done, Maria. I'm done. We're done. Helen is here now, and that's just how it's going to be. I felt dizzy, the room spinning as their words echoed in my head. And Lily? Does she know about this? Does our daughter know that her father is kicking us out for her? James shrugged, a cruel indifference settling over his features. Lily is fine with it. She likes Helen. She understands things you never did. She doesn't want to see you anymore. That hit harder than anything. My own daughter? Siding with this betrayal? I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking, and dialed Lily's number. Lily, is it true? You really don't want to see me anymore? There was a pause on the other end, then Lily's voice, cold and distant. Yeah, Mom, it's true. Helen's cool, you know? She gets fashion, she's fun. Not like you, always stuck with your sewing and clients. You're just old-fashioned. Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to her words. All those nights I stayed up working, all the sacrifices, it was all for her, for our family. And this was how she saw me? I hung up, my heart shattered into pieces. Helen looked pleased, her confidence swelling as she demonstratively stroked James's back, her smile haughty. I couldn't stand to be in that house another minute. I silently packed up the necessary things, my movements robotic. As I walked out the door, the sobs I had been holding back broke free. The drive to the hotel was blurry through my tear-filled eyes. Sobbing with resentment, I checked into the hotel, feeling lost and betrayed. I woke up in the hotel room feeling like I'd been run over. My head ached from crying, and my eyes were so swollen it hurt to blink. My phone buzzed with a message from Anna, my best friend who worked at a law firm. She had heard about the breakup and was checking in. Meeting Anna at a nearby cafe, I tried to compose myself, but as soon as I saw her concerned face, the dam broke again. Maria, oh my God, are you okay? What happened? Anna reached out, her voice full of worry as she grabbed my hands across the table. I shook my head, my voice a whisper. James, he's with someone else. Told me to get out of our home. And Lily, she's siding with him, Anna. Anna's face hardened. That's just cruel, Maria. You don't deserve any of this. You need to fight back, and I know just the person who can help. I blinked, taken aback. A lawyer, you mean? Yes, the best divorce lawyer in the city. I've seen him in action, Maria. He's tough, smart, and he doesn't let anyone push his clients around. I'll call him right now if you want. Do you think I can afford him, though? With everything going on? Anna waved off my concern. He's worth every penny, and I'll help you with the costs if it comes to that. No one messes with my best friend and gets away with it. Encouraged by her fierce loyalty, I nodded. Okay, call him. I want to see James regret what he's done to me and Lily. Anna quickly dialed and spoke briefly with someone on the other end. After she hung up, she smiled. He can meet us tomorrow. He said to bring anything that might help your case. The next day, meeting the lawyer felt like stepping into a new chapter. His office was stark but impressive, and his handshake was firm. Mrs. Richardson, I've been briefed by Anna. I assure you, we're going to sort this out. Now, tell me everything. As I recounted the details, the lawyer took notes, his expression growing more intense. Your husband's actions constitute not only infidelity but also financial betrayal. We can fight for not only your marital home but also adequate support for you and your daughter. Thank you, I just want what's fair. For me and my daughter. Of course. Now, about your financial situation, do you know if your husband has been diverting family funds for his affair? I don't know. I've been too shocked to look into it. We'll get on that right away. If he's been using marital assets to fund his lifestyle with this other woman, that strengthens your case considerably. After the meeting, I went straight to the bank to pull up the bank statements the lawyer requested. My heart sank as I scrolled through the numbers. The savings account that I had earmarked for Lily's education and our retirement was nearly empty. Transactions showed payments for jewelry, expensive restaurants, and trips, none of which were for me or Lily. I gasped, the realization hitting me hard. I had been robbed blind. Back at the lawyer's office, I showed him the statements, my hands trembling. Look at this. It's all gone. He spent it all. The lawyer's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the documents. This is outright theft, Maria. We will definitely get this back. He's not going to get away with it. Before the courtroom drama even began, my lawyer tried to ease the tension and the potential fallout by offering to conclude a settlement agreement. He thought it might be best for everyone, especially Lily, to avoid the spectacle of a trial. But James flatly refused. He was convinced he could win in court and wouldn't budge. I had a heart-wrenching meeting with James and Lily right before we were set to appear in court. During this meeting, Lily dropped a bombshell. I want to live with Dad and Helen, not you, Mom. James and Helen laughed, their happiness piercing my heart like a dagger. It was excruciating to hear, but I swallowed the pain and told her. I respect your decision, Lily. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as I walked in, seeing James sitting confidently with Helen and Lily by his side. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod as we approached our table, ready to face whatever came our way. Remember, stay calm and stick to the facts, he whispered as we sat down. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. We are here to address the dissolution of marriage between Maria Richardson and James Richardson. Mrs. Richardson has also brought forth claims of financial mismanagement. We will proceed with the opening statements. James's lawyer was the first to speak. Your Honor, we contend that Mrs. Richardson's claims are exaggerated. My client has been a good husband and father, and any financial issues were mutual decisions. We seek a fair division of assets and primary custody of their daughter for Mr. Richardson. His words made my blood boil, but I kept my face neutral. My lawyer stood, his voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Mr. Richardson not only committed adultery but also deliberately misused family funds, significantly harming Mrs. Richardson and their daughter's financial security. We seek the marital home, full custody of their daughter, and appropriate financial restitution. The evidence presentation was grueling. I watched as bank statements, receipts, and photos were displayed, each one a stab at the life I thought I had. James squirmed, his discomfort visible, especially as the receipts from jewelry stores and luxury hotels were shown, none of which were for me or with me. The turning point came when my lawyer presented a series of messages between James and Helen, clearly detailing their affair and his spending on her. The evidence was damning, and even James's lawyer seemed to falter. Mr. Richardson, can you explain these messages? My lawyer asked, his tone cool. James stuttered, his facade crumbling. It was just a fling. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't using family funds for. Your Honor, the bank statements disagree. My lawyer interjected, showing the court the detailed transactions that James couldn't explain away. In his closing statement, my lawyer was resolute. Mrs. Richardson trusted her husband to honor their shared life and responsibilities. Instead, she and her daughter were betrayed. We ask for a ruling that reflects the gravity of Mr. Richardson's actions. James and Helen were silent as the courtroom buzzed around them. The judge nodded, taking in all the information before adjourning the session. The courtroom was packed on the day of the final hearing, the air heavy with anticipation. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my nerves in check. James, Lily, and Helen were on the other side, looking confident and smug. The judge cleared his throat and began reading the decision. In light of the evidence presented, I am awarding the marital home to Mrs. Richardson, along with financial compensation from Mr. Richardson for the misappropriation of family assets. My heart leaped with a mix of relief and victory, but the most crucial part was yet to come. The judge continued. Now, regarding the custody of the minor child, Lily Richardson. James interrupted, standing up with a sneer. Your Honor, my daughter has expressed her desire to live with me and my partner, which means Mrs. Richardson should be paying us child support for her maintenance. There was a murmur in the courtroom. I felt a cold wave of fear, but before I could say anything, Lily stood up. She looked straight at the judge, her voice clear and strong. "I've changed my mind. I want to live with my mom. I've realized my dad used the money my mom saved for my education. I was wrong before. My mom is the best. She's smart and modern, and I want to be with her." The courtroom fell silent. James's face dropped, his smug smile wiped away in an instant. Tears of happiness and relief rolled down my cheeks as I listened to Lily's words. The judge nodded, looking impressed by Lily's courage. "The court respects the minor's wishes. Custody of Lily Richardson will be granted to Mrs. Richardson. Furthermore, Mr. Richardson will provide child support payments." James slumped back into his seat, defeated. The judge concluded the proceedings, and as we walked out of the courtroom, I pulled Lily into a tight embrace. "I love you so much, Lily. I'm so proud of you." As we exited, we saw James and Helen arguing heatedly. Helen's voice was shrill as she berated him. "I don't need a loser who's broke. I'm finding someone who can actually provide for me." With that, she stormed off, leaving James standing there, utterly alone and broken. A few months after the dust had settled and our lives began to find a new rhythm, a bit of unexpected news found its way to me. Turns out, James was fired from his job not long after the court's decision. He struggled to find work for a good while, which was something I heard through the grapevine. When he finally did land a job, it was as a handyman. The days of fancy suits and expensive shoes were behind him. With that chapter behind us, life in our new home felt like waking up to a new world. "Mom, I was thinking," Lily started, her spoon clinking against her cereal bowl. "Why don't we do something big with the atelier? Like, really shake things up?" I smiled, sipping my coffee. "What do you have in mind?" "Maybe we could start online classes, teach people how to sew and design. Share what you've taught me. It could be a whole new part of our business," she suggested, her eyes bright with excitement. As we talked, the seeds of our new project took root. We spent the weekend mapping out our ideas, turning the atelier into a buzzing hub of creativity and innovation. The next few months were a whirlwind. We launched our website, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People from all over signed up for classes, eager to learn from us. The sense of community was palpable, even through the screen. Our lives had settled into a comfortable rhythm, filled with fabric swatches and video tutorials. The atelier was thriving, and so were we. But something was still missing, and I knew exactly what it was. One sunny afternoon, I broached the subject with Lily. "How would you feel about moving to a bigger place? Somewhere with more space for both our home and the business?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Really? Could we? I've been saving up, and with the business doing well, I think it's the perfect time. We could use a fresh start, don't you think?" "Absolutely, Mom. Let's do it," she agreed without hesitation. So, we began house hunting, eventually finding a charming little house in the suburbs, with plenty of room for both our living quarters and a spacious new atelier. Moving day was a flurry of boxes and laughter, the excitement palpable as we set up our new home. The house quickly filled with new memories, every room echoing with our laughter and dreams. The atelier, now twice the size of our old one, became a local hub for aspiring designers and hobbyists alike. Looking out over our new beginning, I knew we had finally found our place in the world. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving, about making each day count. Hey, I'm Emily. Since I was little, Mom and Dad, who never got past high school, scraped together what little they could for my college fund. They worked their butts off, believing education was my ticket to a better life. I busted my tail in high school, also I wouldn't let their sacrifices go to waste. When I got my acceptance letter to study investment management at one of the top colleges, we all cried tears of joy. My college days were hectic, but exciting. I juggled classes and a part-time job tutoring to keep some cash in my pocket. That's how I met Mark. He was a year behind me, kinda struggling with the coursework, and ended up being assigned to me for extra help. "Look, I just don't get this stuff," he'd say, scratching his head and staring down at the finance books like they were written in another language. "You will," I told him. "Just break it down into smaller pieces. Don't try to swallow it whole." Mark was easygoing with a quick smile that made the late-night study sessions less of a grind. He appreciated my help, and we hit it off, chatting about everything from music to our favorite TV shows. It wasn't long before those study sessions turned into coffee outings, then movie nights. One night, we were both at a college party, laughing over cups of cheap beer. "You know, I've always wondered why someone as smart as you hangs out with a dunce like me," he joked, nudging me with his elbow. "Guess I have a thing for lost causes," I shot back, elbowing him right back. We both laughed, and something about that night felt different. Maybe it was the buzz of the party or just the right amount of beer, but I felt myself looking at him differently. We stumbled out of the party together, leaning on each other, half walking, half dancing down the street. "So, what do you say, Em? Want to make this a regular thing?" Mark slurred, his words sloppy but his eyes serious. I remember laughing, the sound loud in the quiet night. "Are you asking me out, Mark?" "Yeah, I guess I am," he said, and there was a challenge in his tone, like he dared me to say no. "All right, you've got yourself a deal," I replied, and we shook on it, sealing our goofy pact with a high five that turned into us holding hands as we walked. Things with Mark felt natural, easy, like slipping into an old, comfortable pair of jeans. We finished college together, me with my degree that was supposed to open doors, and him just relieved to be done. Our relationship wasn't just built on love, it was built on a deep friendship, the kind you don't find every day. After we tied the knot, things kicked off pretty well for me career-wise. I landed a killer job right out of college, thanks to my knack for numbers and a bit of hustle. The pay was good, the benefits even better. Mark, though, wasn't having the same luck. He bounced around job interviews like a pinball, each time coming home a bit more deflated than the last. One evening, I came home late to find him slouched on the couch, staring blankly at some job postings on his laptop. "Any luck today?" I asked, dropping my bag and kicking off my shoes. He glanced up, a forced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Nah, same old, same old. I guess I'm too stupid." "Hey, don't talk like that. You're just in a rough patch." I squeezed his hand, trying to transfer some of my optimism to him. "Look, why don't you take a break from this? Let's go grab a bite. My treat." Mark closed his laptop with a sigh. "Sure, why not? Not like I've got interviews lining up or anything." We ended up at a small diner around the corner, a place we frequented when we first moved in together. As we slid into our usual booth, Mark's mood seemed to lift a bit. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude, came over to take our order. "The usual for you too?" she asked, popping her gum. Mark grinned. "Yeah, and keep the coffee coming, Judy. It's been one of those days." "Coming right up, hun," she shot back with a wink. While we waited for our food, I watched Mark play with the sugar packets, lining them up and knocking them down like dominoes. "You know, maybe this is a sign," he said suddenly. "Maybe I'm not cut out for these corporate gigs. Maybe I should think outside the box." I leaned in, curious. "Like what?" "I don't know, something hands-on, something real. Not just shuffling papers and pleasing bosses." "You'd be great at that," I said, meaning every word. "You're good with people, Mark. Maybe something in sales?" Mark chuckled, his eyes lighting up a bit. "That might be a good idea." The conversation drifted as our food arrived, but I could tell something had sparked in Mark. For the first time in months, he seemed to consider the possibilities rather than dwell on the failures. It took a good while, but finally, he snagged a position. Not the dream job by any stretch, and the paycheck? Well, it was nearly half of what I was pulling in. I didn't mind the disparity, I was just glad he found something. But Mark, he took it hard. You could see it ate at him, being the one who brought less to the table. I just never thought I'd be the one being supported, he admitted one night, his voice low, almost drowned out by the hum of the microwave in our tiny kitchen. Hey, it's us against the bills, not you against me. I tried to reassure him, passing him a beer. We're a team, right? Yeah, a team, he echoed, but his half-smile didn't reach his eyes. Over time, though, he seemed to get used to the setup. The weight of paying rent, groceries, and everything in between fell on my shoulders, and I handled it without a fuss. I even splurged on him now and then, fancy gadgets, the kind of clothes he wouldn't buy for himself. Mark got cozy with this arrangement, real cozy. Started pointing out stuff in stores, saying, "Hey, that would look great on me, huh?" I laughed it off, clouded by love, thinking this was just playful banter between us. My colleagues at work saw it differently. "He's getting a bit too comfortable, don't you think?" They'd hint after I shared stories over lunch. I shrugged off their concerns, figuring they just didn't see the full picture of our marriage. "He's been through a rough patch, it's my turn to spoil him a bit." I'd defend him, keeping my tone light. Just when I thought we had our lives on a steady track, the unexpected whacked us upside the head. The investment firm where I was making waves suddenly crashed, bankrupt, out of the blue. I came home that day, my head spinning, papers from HR clutched in my shaky hands. "Mark, you won't believe what happened," I said as soon as I walked through the door. I was met with the sight of him on the sofa, gaming controller in hand, mid-game. He paused his game and looked up, brows knitted. "What's up, babe?" "The company, they're done. Bankrupt. I'm jobless." He sat up straighter, the seriousness of the situation cutting through the usual homecoming chit-chat. "What? But you were just talking about a promotion last week." "Yeah, well, so much for that." I tossed the papers on the coffee table, a mix of severance info and legal jargon. "Everything's gone to hell, just like that." Mark set his controller down and came over to me, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "Emily, that's crazy. What are you gonna do?" I sank into the couch, the weight of the news anchoring me down. "I don't know. I need to start looking, I guess. But who's gonna hire someone from a tanked firm? It's like I've got the plague now." He rubbed my back, trying to be the rock I needed then. "You'll find something. You're brilliant. Any company would be lucky to have you." But weeks turned into months, and every interview ended with some version of "we'll be in touch," which really meant "don't hold your breath." The rejections piled up, slamming me with doubt and worry. One evening, after yet another "thanks, but no thanks," I vented to Mark over dinner. "It's like I'm toxic, Mark. Today, one guy actually said, 'Sorry, but we can't risk someone associated with that kind of failure.' As if I personally ran the company into the ground." Mark shook his head, stabbing at his food. "That's bull. They don't know what they're missing." "Yeah, well, apparently they think they're dodging a bullet," I muttered, pushing my own food around my plate. Then the bills started to grow, a monstrous pile that seemed to taunt us from the kitchen counter. Each envelope a reminder that my savings wouldn't last forever. Mark tried to pick up extra hours, but it wasn't enough to keep up. One night, as I was crunching numbers, trying to make sense of our dwindling finances, Mark came into the kitchen, a sheepish look on his face. "So, about the bills." I didn't even look up. "What about them?" He shuffled his feet, a sure sign he was nervous. "Well, it's just, I'm not pulling in much. Maybe we should cut back some more. Maybe we could move to a smaller place? Or sell the car?" I stared at him, the reality of our situation washing over me in a cold wave. "We're really in it, aren't we?" Mark nodded, coming over to wrap his arms around me. "We'll figure it out, Em. We always do." Weeks of fruitless job hunting ground me down, each day chipping away at my savings and hope. The money was running out fast, and Mark, who had grown used to a comfortable life, now shouldered all our bills. This shift brought out a side of him I'd never seen before. One night, he exploded. "You're just sitting around all day, doing nothing." "I'm out there busting my ass, and for what? To come home to a freeloader?" His words stung. "Freeloader? Really, Mark? Who do you think kept us afloat all these years?" I shot back, my voice sharp with hurt and anger. He just scoffed, shaking his head. "Yeah, well, past's past. What are you doing now?" "Nothing." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the man I married. But before I could gather my thoughts to respond, the real blow came just a few days later. I came home early to grab some documents I needed for yet another potential job lead. As I opened the door, I froze. There was Mark in our living room, cozy with a woman I'd never seen. She was draped on his arm, laughing up at him like she owned the place. Mark straightened up, clearing his throat. "This is Anna. She's going to be my wife." The woman, Anna, looked me over with a smug grin. "He needs someone young and beautiful, if he's going to spend his money. Not someone who can't even keep a job." They laughed together, a sound that burned into my memory. I felt my heart shatter, rage and disbelief swirling into a toxic cloud in my chest. Then Mark did the unthinkable. He pulled out a stack of papers from behind him. "Here, divorce papers. I think it's time you moved on, Emily." Without saying another word, I took the papers. My hands shook as I signed them, each stroke of the pen severing the last ties I had to the man I once loved. I packed my things, my movements robotic. As I zipped up my suitcase, Mark and Anna didn't even pause their celebration. The contrast between their laughter and the tight, painful lump in my throat was too much. Walking out of that apartment, suitcase in hand, felt like stepping into a void. I had no job, no husband, and suddenly, no home. The morning after I left Mark, I woke up early, feeling displaced, but determined to start over. I had spent the night at a cheap motel, the kind where you pay cash and no one asks questions. I knew I needed a plan, fast. After a stale coffee and a dry muffin from the motel's vending machine, I walked the streets, aimlessly at first. Then, I remembered a beauty salon nearby, a place I used to frequent back in better days. The owner, Linda, had always been kind to me. Maybe, just maybe, she had some work, anything really. Linda was at the counter, her back turned, stocking some shelves. "Can I help you?" she called out without looking. "Linda, it's Emily. I was wondering if you had any work available." "Anything at all," I said, my voice a mix of hope and desperation. She turned around, her face lighting up with recognition, then concern. "Emily? Honey, what happened? You look like you've been through the ringer." I sighed, the story spilling out of me, the job loss, Mark's betrayal, the divorce. She listened, her expression softening with each word I said. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Let's see what we can do for you." She pondered for a moment, tapping a finger on her lips. "You know, I need someone to help manage the front desk, answer phones, schedule appointments. You think you could handle that?" I nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely. I'd be grateful for any opportunity, Linda." She smiled, her warm, reassuring self. "Good. Why don't you start tomorrow? We'll figure out the rest as we go. And hey, about a place to stay, the apartment above the shop is empty. It's not much, but it's clean and safe. You can stay there for half the rent until you're back on your feet." I was overwhelmed, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "Linda, thank you. This means so much to me." "None of that now." She waved off my thanks. "You'd do the same in my shoes. Let's not make it a big deal. Just be here at 8 tomorrow, bright and early." The next few weeks were a blur of learning and adjusting. Linda showed me the ropes, and I picked up the nuances of the beauty industry quicker than I thought. It was like I was slowly piecing myself back together, finding a new purpose in a place I hadn't expected. Mark and my old life seemed like a distant memory, a bad dream that had loosened its grip on me. I worked hard, stayed late when needed, and slowly, I began to feel whole again. But it wasn't just about surviving anymore, I was starting to thrive. Linda noticed too. "Emily, you've really turned this place around," she said one evening as we were closing up. "I'm thinking about expanding, opening another location. What do you think about running this one for me if I do?" The offer took my breath away. "Really? Linda, are you serious?" "As a heart attack," she chuckled. "Think it over. No rush." As I walked up to my little apartment above the shop, I realized that this, right here, was my fresh start. My chance to rebuild not just my career, but my life. Running the beauty salon started to feel like second nature. Every day, I put in all I had, and Linda noticed. One morning, as we were gearing up for another busy day, she came in with her usual spark. "Morning, Em. How's our little empire doing?" Linda grinned, checking the schedule packed with appointments. "Booming," I replied, flipping through the day's bookings. "We might even need to think about hiring more hands soon." "That's what I like to hear," she said, clapping her hands with excitement. "Actually, that's kinda what I wanted to talk to you about today." "Oh? What's up?" I asked, curious about the tone in her voice. Linda motioned towards her office. "Let's step into my lair for a sec." Once we were settled behind closed doors, Linda leaned forward, all business. "Look, Em, you've made this place shine. I've been thinking a lot about how we can grow, not just here, but really expand our reach." I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. "Are you talking about opening another location?" "Not just another salon, Em. I'm talking big. I'm planning a whole network of salons, and I want you in on it, not just as a manager, but as a co-owner. We'd split everything 50-50. Her words hit me like a wave. "Co-owner?" I echoed, the weight of the offer sinking in. "Yes," Linda nodded firmly. "I've seen what you can do, and I trust you. You're ready for this, and I want us to tackle it as partners. What do you say?" The possibility of stepping up like this was both thrilling and daunting. Wow, Linda. I'm honored. And yeah, a bit freaked out." Linda laughed, that hearty sound that always put me at ease. "Good. A little fear keeps you sharp. Think about it, but I'm serious. We could make a real go of this." We hashed out some preliminary ideas right there, brainstorming into the afternoon. The thought of co-owning a business was huge, but with Linda by my side, it felt possible. The next few weeks, I dove into preparations. Hiring, training new staff, and overseeing the salon operations became part of a larger plan. Our clients noticed the positive changes, and the buzz was infectious. Linda and I spent evenings at a local cafe, laptops open, plans sprawling across the table. We talked leases, decor, branding, every detail of our expansion. Finally, the day came to announce our plans to the staff. Everyone gathered around, excited and a bit anxious about the future. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda started, her voice brimming with pride, "thanks to your hard work, and especially Emily's leadership, we're expanding. And Emily here isn't just going to be your boss. She's going to be my partner in this venture. We're in this together." The team cheered, and I felt a swell of pride and determination. This was my shot, our shot, to build something lasting. It had been 7 years since the divorce, and life had moved on. I was in one of my salons, chatting with Mrs. Peterson, an elderly client who loved getting her hair done here every month. We were laughing about something trivial when the door swung open, and there he was, my ex-husband, Mark, with Anna, the same woman he had left me for. I stiffened, but before I could say a word, Mark burst out laughing, loud enough for everyone in the salon to hear. "Look at this, Emily has become just a simple hairdresser. What a waste of all that fancy education." Anna chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Yeah, what a total loser. Guess the high-flying job didn't work out, huh?" The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. I felt every eye in the place on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. But before I could gather my thoughts, Mrs. Peterson stood up from her chair, her cape still draped around her. She pointed a manicured finger at them, her voice sharp as a tack. "You two ought to shut your mouths. This woman here," she waved her hand at me, "owns not only this salon but a whole chain of them. She was just named one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in the country." Mark's laughter died in his throat. He looked like he'd been slapped. Anna's face went from mocking to shocked in an instant. "And another thing," Mrs. Peterson continued, her eyes narrowing, "I live next door to you clowns. Mark, you're hardly ever sober, and you get fired from your job so often it's a wonder you have any work at all." Mark's face turned beet red, from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. He grabbed Anna's arm, muttering something under his breath about leaving. As they headed towards the door, Anna suddenly whirled around and stormed back in, Mark trailing helplessly behind her. "I want my hair done here, and I want you to do it, Emily," Anna declared, standing defiantly in the middle of the salon. Her voice was loud, her tone brazen, as if challenging me directly. I raised an eyebrow, taking in her audacious demand. "Sure, I can do that. It'll be $250 for a cut and style with me." Her confidence wavered, her eyes widening at the quote. "What? I'm not going to spend a quarter of my salary on some hairstyle." Mark, looking defeated and embarrassed, tried to pull her away again. "Come on, Anna, let's just go." They left for good this time, with Anna still muttering under her breath about the prices. I watched through the window as they got into an old car that looked like it had seen better days. As the days turned into weeks, the incident with Mark became just another story that added to the rich tapestry of my life's unexpected turns. The salons were thriving, and with each passing day, I found more reasons to look forward with optimism rather than backward with any regret. One crisp morning, while I was arranging the new line of organic hair care products on the shelves, Linda strolled in, her eyes bright with what I knew was another big idea. "I've been thinking about how we can expand our brand. What do you think about starting a training academy right here in the salon? We could teach the next generation of stylists, pass on what we've learned." I paused, considering the idea. It was bold, like most of Linda's ideas, but it made sense. "That sounds amazing. We've got the space, and it could really set us apart from the competition," I replied, my mind already racing with the possibilities. "Exactly my thought." Linda clapped her hands, her enthusiasm infectious. "And I want you to lead this project, Em. You've got the knack for this, and I trust your judgment completely." The idea of leading such a significant new venture was both thrilling and daunting, but I felt ready for the challenge. "I'd love to, Linda. Really, it means a lot that you trust me with this." We spent the next few hours sketching out what the academy could look like, discussing everything from curriculum to licensing. As we talked, I realized how far I had come, from feeling defeated and alone to charting the future of a business I co-owned. Later that day, as I was tidying up after a busy afternoon, one of our regular clients, Mrs. Harper, approached me. She had been coming to the salon since we opened this location and had always shown an interest in the business side of things. "Emily, I've been hearing great things about what you're planning," she began, her tone earnest. "You know, my granddaughter is finishing school soon, and she's got a real passion for beauty. Maybe she could join your academy?" "That would be wonderful, Mrs. Harper," I said, genuinely pleased. "We'd be honored to help her start her journey. Once we get everything set up, let's make sure she's one of the first students." Mrs. Harper beamed. "Thank you, Emily. It's young women like you who inspire her. She talks about how you turned things around and made a success of yourself." Hearing that filled me with a warm glow of pride and a sense of responsibility. "We try to inspire where we can," I replied with a smile. That evening, as I locked up the salon, I thought about the future. There was so much potential, so much yet to achieve. The road hadn't been easy, but every challenge had strengthened me, every setback had taught me something valuable.